When creating your JMeter test plan, inevitably you'll need to confirm that it works as intended before running it against your target test application. In essence, you'll need to test your test to confirm that the results it generates are reliable. In this brief video, we will walk you through the basics of debugging common problems in your JMeter load tests. As the test plan is built up, we will invariably run it locally at various stages of construction. We will want to catch simple mistakes such as typos in URLs, logical errors, and other basic problems. While there are certainly additional methods and tools available, we will describe a few common ways to debug your load tests locally. The easiest and most straightforward way to do this is to add a view results tree listener to your JMeter test. Having this element added to your test will provide you with real-time results from each request generated. It can be found under the listener submenu when adding a new test plan element. In this simple test, we have configured 5 samplers, which will make requests against HTTP website endpoints. Let's add a view results tree and examine the output of running this test locally within the JMeter GUI. Here you can see the request and the response for each request. This will enable us to verify the samplers connecting to the intended endpoint and that the expected response is being received. Here's an HTTP request and a normal expected response. It can be contrasted with this other request, which contains a typo in the URL field and generates an error. Here we have an unknown host exception for a URL which does not exist. One thing to remember is that we should always disable any view results tree listeners when we run our test to collect real data or in the cloud. Another good option for debugging tests locally is using JMeter's built-in log viewer. This can be displayed from the JMeter GUI from the Options menu. While the log viewer can similarly display problems with requests just like the view results tree, we may use the log viewer to display much more detailed information. This is especially useful when we are attempting to debug custom scripting such as with a JSR223 post processor element. Here we have revealed a mistake in our script, with the error message visible in the log viewer. This was an intentional typo to demonstrate what an error might look like inside the log viewer. As our scripts become more complicated, this is an indispensable window in what our scripts may be doing, especially when they generate an error. Along these same lines, we can add a statement to our scripts that will write log messages directly. This may be useful in determining a suspected point of failure in our scripts, where we can output a simple text message, or we can have our scripts output variables to the logs as part of the message. We can do this with the log.info statement. Here is the result of that log.info statement, where the contents of my variable are visible. There are also tools outside of JMeter that we can use locally to debug more complicated requests as we construct our test plan. An example of such a tool specific to API request debugging is the popular Postman application. Here we have an API request that we want to include as part of our load test. We can use Postman to see exactly what the request and response might look like for each request. We have more examples of using Postman on our blog, so be sure to check that out. Once we are past the local stages of debugging and we are ready to move our test into the cloud, there are additional ways to forensically debug our test to identify problems in a production type setting. We will use Redline 13 as the example for a cloud test framework, though the concept should carry over to any cloud testing provider. These tests are typically run with JMeter in headless mode, as it dispenses with the overhead of the GUI and gives us maximum real-world performance. Without the luxury of the GUI, we will have to rely on analysis of raw output and log files to identify potential issues. A feature that Redline 13 provides is a simple error table. During and following the execution of our test, the most common errors are displayed at the bottom of the results page. This error table gives us our first clues into whether a test is performing as intended. We can either use these reported errors directly, or search criteria to analyze the JMeter log files as we cover next. One of the best ways to debug a problematic load test is to directly view the JMeter log files. There is a feature built into Redline 13 that makes this an easy task. In order to save your output and log files on the platform, you must check the Save Response Output and Calculate Percentiles option prior to running your load test. This will provide you with the ability to download both the JMeter output files as well as the raw log files for each generator server. To download the files after the test completes, simply click on the Compressed Archive under Output Files for any listed load generator server. In this case, you can find the actual log files inside the output folder within the downloaded compressed archive. Here is the log file. And here is the raw JMeter output file. We can see in this case there are several error messages, including an unknown host exception, which you might find useful in troubleshooting problems with our requests and scripts. We hope that you find these tips useful in debugging your JMeter load tests. Be sure to check out our other JMeter videos on our YouTube channel covering other helpful topics related to JMeter.